This is like, for in terms of design, this is why I focus a lot right now on behavioral economics. If I'm doing e-commerce websites or anything that's selling things, understanding how we think and what motivates us and what compels us to make one decision over another or pick something versus another, that's really a fundamental that a designer should understand when they're making these kinds of products.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Design Exchange podcast. This episode was recorded before the pandemic, and a lot has changed for our guest, John Deragon, since then. He's now the head of design at FPT Software, one of the largest IT companies in Vietnam, and he's also launched cafescene.com, where he shares photos and reviews of some of the many wonderful cafes around Ho Chi Minh City. We talk a little bit more about life and travel than we do about design in this episode, but I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you. Good afternoon, evening, or morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Design Exchange podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Grové, and with me today is John Deragon, a UX or user experience design expert. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to be here.
Yeah. We are coming to you from the rooftop of the Winking Seal Beer Company's tap room here in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, where John moved at some point.
Yes.
I mean, not to the brewery, but to Saigon.
For the brewery.
Is that right? When you, I first met you, when was the first time you visited Vietnam?
I was probably about 5 years ago.
And I think I saw you give a presentation at like a UX, and it was an event that you were kind of the main speaker at.
Yeah, and that was at one of the co-working spaces. They had like a pool there, and I was doing it along this sort of the side of the pool. And I was just doing sort of a general UX talk about, design process and all of that. It must have been then.
I think so. And soon after that, you moved to Vietnam. You were here visiting from Australia, though you're Canadian.
Yeah, correct.
And then soon after that, you moved to Vietnam, but you moved to Hanoi. Why did you move to Hanoi?
Oh, well, okay. So for the first about a year, I lived in Ho Chi Minh, working for an e-commerce company here, doing UX. And actually went back to Australia, did some contract gigs, had another opportunity to actually go up and live in Hanoi and do another e-commerce contract up there, and spent about 11 months up there and realized I need to come back to Ho Chi Minh and set up shop here, basically. Yeah.
Well, welcome here.
Happy to be back, I gotta say.
Some people definitely prefer Hanoi over Ho Chi Minh City, but I think the vast majority of foreigners prefer Ho Chi Minh City over Hanoi.
Well, let me put it this way. I liked living up there, and I thought the daily sort of quality of life was quite good. It's a very nice city, but I think there's something that really draws me to Ho Chi Minh, and I have good friends here. And I think the events and sort of the get-togethers and the things that are happening in Ho Chi Minh are very aligned to what I look for. And sort of, if I'm picking a city, it's just so perfectly aligned to what I want out of life. So I can't put it any more clearly than that.
For our listeners out there not familiar with Vietnam, there are kind of three major cities in Vietnam. The one in the north is Hanoi. In the center, you have Da Nang. And then in the south, you have Ho Chi Minh City, also known as Saigon. And Hanoi is the political capital of Vietnam. It's where the seat of the government is. You could think of it like the Washington, D.C. of Vietnam. And Saigon is like the New York City of Saigon. It's the commercial capital.
Yeah.
And people... I mean, the city, as I've heard, I've visited a few times, but as I've heard, Hanoi is kind of characterized as being a little more stiff, a little less relaxed, because you have, the government, the regulatory powers of the government are more manifest near the seat of the government than when you get as far from the seat of the government as possible. But
it's possibly, it's possibly a bit more reserved, but you still have a good time there. That's without a doubt. So it's not that, and it may not be a fair label to say that it's a stiff city. There are many good times that I've had there. Trust me,
I'm the king
it's
of
a good city.
unfair labels.
No, no, no. That's not the label that you've placed on it. I think I've heard that many times. And I think having spent almost a year there, I go, actually, this is an amazing city. It's quite a dynamic city. Actually, I really liked it. I'd live there again. But wow, Ho Chi Minh, for me, really ticks all the boxes. Like in a day-to-day, what I do each day, it just perfectly caters for that.
What kind of boxes are you ticking?
I mean, look at this place. I mean, if you
Warm,
look at it,
warm weather or
well, yeah. I mean, actually, it's kind of nice when you're in Hanoi and you've had just unbelievable heat. Hanoi is one of those cities, and I'd never experienced this before, where it's 37 in the day, and you go, okay, fair enough. The sun is just beating down, and it's going like that for a week or 2 weeks, but at night it's 35, and it's literally. I remember standing on West Lake, by the side of the lake, going, holy shit, it's hot. It's like middle of the day hot, but there's no sun. Like, I just haven't been in a city where it was that phenomenon, like so strong, where you go, my God, it's really hot. And then it just kind of dips into this nice, cool autumn, I guess it is. Autumn? It's not fall because there's nothing falling. It's autumn. And then you get this winter, and it's refreshing, and you're kind of bundling up, but you don't have the bullshit in Toronto to deal with, which is mega amounts of snow and frostbite and all that stuff that I have no desire to be in. It kind of cuts all of that off and says, look, we're going to get down to about like 15 degrees. You're going to go brrr on your motorbike, and you're going to bundle up.
You're talking Celsius, right?
Yeah, Celsius. Yeah. And it's bearable. It's a temperate winter, right? And it's okay. But here, this is like 33 every day. I'm okay with that. I grew up in Toronto, and every winter you're just sitting there looking out the window, just dreaming of palm trees. And now that's what I wake up to. I will look out the window and there's palm trees. So I'm okay. I'm all right.
I'm from the Midwest. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and I went to school in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that Toronto's not that different from where I grew up, but maybe I'm wrong.
No.
I've only been to Toronto a handful of times.
Okay, you've been there and you kind of got
times,
the gist of it.
I don't know, like
it's a bit of a cold city. Look, Toronto's a great city. There's a lot going on. There's a huge arts scene and blah blah blah. But it does have this kind of cold feeling to it that you couldn't shake. And that's not just the winter, it's just in general. So like if you go right in the CBD of Toronto, it's just very concrete, a lot of buildings and that. If I look just from what I can see here, it's just this eclectic mix of all sorts of stuff to look at. And if I'm in the middle of Toronto, it doesn't strike me as interesting, or I don't know, it feels bland.
Well, that sounds like a Midwest city capital also. So
sure, fair enough. Yeah.
I'm going to say I was.
I mean, there's
right
some
with my
beautiful parts
assessment.
of Toronto. Don't get me wrong, but even where I live here in Ho Chi Minh, in District 2, and I ride down on my motorbike down the main street, and there's just this, I don't know, just every trip there's just something different and just something visually striking that's happening, and there's this bustle, and it's impossible to replicate that if I went back to Toronto in any form or matter.
How much of that do you think is because you're out of your element?
Oh,
So
yeah,
everything
part
is
of it.
more novel?
Yeah.
Like
But
if-
I've been here a few years, and you would think that would you go, okay, yeah, I get it. But there's something so intriguing about going down that main street every day. And there was a small like motorbike shop that just sells used bikes, right? And I just drove here on the grab bike to get here. It's just fucking gone. Like it's just literally 2 days ago. It's up. The guy's out in front on the plastic chair selling bikes or whatever. You got your your Nuvos lined up out front or whatever. And today it's just gone. Like it literally desecrated. And I don't know what's going to go up, but every week just something's changing and evolving, and Just, every day there's a different configuration of stalls and what people are doing. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's so visually striking. And when I lived in Australia, for example, neighborhoods that I grew up in when I was going to high school, it's identical now. And this is, there's 25 years later. There's no okay, the Blockbuster is not there now, but there's a new real estate agent opened up, 10 years ago. It's just, and I find that, I don't know, I that's not for me. I love this vibrance.
Thank you. This one's some kind of Korean IPA.
Oh yeah, they do collaborations here, which is great. They mix it up all the time. I just had a wheat ale before you came. Just fantastic. I think to go back to your question before about,
What was my question? I don't remember.
it's just like, what boxes does Ho Chi Minh check?
Okay.
Yeah, is things like this.
There's
No
a lot of
joke.
lifestyle stuff going on, right?
There's a lot of lifestyle stuff. So if you look at the whole region of Southeast Asia, Vietnam is an absolute gem with things like beer and coffee and all of these really sort of things that you really want to have good quality of, right? And they do them very well. The craft beer scene in Vietnam is done tremendously well. And there's a lot of really good brands, like this and others that are popping up, and they're doing well, and they're making good quality beverages. Coffee scene, the same thing. I mean, the Vietnamese, it's a huge industry here, and that it's funny when you look at any given street in the city, you would think that there's like this government decree that every street has to have 10 cafes on it.
There's a lot of coffee shops here.
Yeah,
And
there's
a lot of them are very good.
A lot of them are absolutely fantastic. And if you look at all of these sort of new wave ones that are sort of coming online, this is fantastic coffee. And the experience is good. The coffee is good. The quality of the baristas is amazing. Love it. Absolutely love it.
This is a very natural segue. You have been working on. You can announce it now because this episode's not going to come out for a while.
Jeez.
So you've been working on a website for exposing the best cafes in Saigon.
Yes. It's a passion project called cafescene.com. And for the years that I've lived here, I've gone to a lot of cafes. I've done a lot of sort of nomads, sort of set up the MacBook doing work, and but also just as a coffee enthusiast. And I just think, oh my God, there's just so many good cafes. But if you go, just as a foreigner, as a tourist coming in here and just going on the Google Maps and you go, coffee's nearby, it's just this barrage of just whatever. It's nonsensical.
The signal to noise ratio is going to be crazy.
It's insane. It's insane. And you don't know what's good or bad. So I'm trying to put together a platform that just shares sort of, a curated listing of very good coffee experiences. And, to the benefit of people that are coming to Vietnam for the first time, some of the very best experiences are not on Main Street. You gotta sort of go through alleyways and up staircases and sort of, trek your way off the beaten path, but you're highly rewarded for that. You get something that is unique and, I don't know, just fascinating. Like the amount of effort that's put into, the venue itself and the care that's put into the coffee. This is worlds apart than just going over to a franchise or whatever. The indie scene is done incredibly well here. So it's trying to basically represent that.
When some people go on vacation, they try to find the best beaches. For the most part, when I go on vacation, I try to find where is the best coffee in that city.
Thank you. Yes, likewise. I just came back from Japan, which I'm sure you're, not a stranger to. And there were some amazing coffee shops there.
Where did you go?
I was in Kyoto and Tokyo and sort of all the sort of prefectures around there, and got a decent number of cafes. So I'll probably put those on the site as well because they're incredibly unique. And, some of them are just very artistic in their design, just very strange. You sort of go into this upper floor and there's sort of like stadium seating around the periphery of it. and then a giant tree in the middle, and it's all painted white. And you sit there and you have your coffee, and there's like lanterns around the side and kind of really chilled out indie music, and you go, okay, all right, I'm okay with this.
Is the tree painted white?
No,
Okay.
no, except the tree.
Okay. Everything is white except for the tree, which
Except
is a real tree.
and the
not
people in
painted
there.
white.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They didn't go completely bonkers.
In Kyoto, there is a coffee shop called Percent Arabica.
Oh my goodness, on the corner.
They have maybe 2 or 3 locations there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did go to one of them.
And then now they've actually got, I'm going to misquote them. So I'm going to say 13 locations worldwide, but it's
Are you
probably wrong.
serious?
It's probably 20 by now.
I have to say they did a very good cappuccino there. Yes, very nice. And it was the one I went to was just sort of a very small but nicely put together. Coffee was good. Yes, fantastic. Yes.
So did you go to the one that's close to the river or close to Gion Shijo?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I was there for a few days.
Okay.
So
Japan has 2 types of coffee houses
yes.
that are 2 types of good coffee houses. They have the traditional Japanese coffee house,
Yes.
where the main dish on the menu is called Wiener Kohi.
Yes.
So it's a Vienna style coffee, they think.
Yes.
It's a brewed coffee
But
with
it hits the spot.
it's a brewed coffee
Yeah.
with whipping cream,
Yeah.
but they're very precise. Like they weigh the beans, they grind them.
It's like doing a pour over, right?
Yeah, it's a pour over. Yeah, it is. It's a pour over. So they weigh the beans, they grind the beans, they weigh the grounds to make sure that it's the same weight.
because the molecules count.
Yeah, and then they do a pour over.
This is precision. You know what? I gotta respect the craft in that. This is really precision stuff, and they're really trying to get it to a level of perfection. I have to admire that. I mean, if you're gonna sit there and pump out coffees every day, why not do a beautiful job of that? It inspired me actually when I went to Japan and I came back. It's funny enough, it was actually easier to get that whole Hario kit of the gooseneck kettle and the V60 pour over kit and all of that. Actually, it was easier for some reason for me to just get it here in Ho Chi Minh. So it would have actually had to come over and actually be imported. And for some reason, I just basically went down the street from here and was able to get the whole kit and start experimenting with that and getting a nice hand burr grinder and that. There's something very satisfying about that whole process of doing coffee, whether you're setting up your machine and doing a cappuccino, or you're burr grinding and then you're doing that whole thing to make this ultimate cup of coffee, and you're refining that process as you go. I don't know, there's something so good about that. Even if you think of in Japan or in China, that whole tea serving ceremony process. It's not just here's your cup of tea. There's a whole thing that happens, right? There's certain sequence of events that happen. I really have a lot of admiration for that, and I think there's too much of just slopping something into a paper cup now that's lost all of that process that goes into it. And apparently robots are going to make our coffee at some point, so it'll be so distant from sort of this artisanal version of putting heart into what you're going to consume. I don't know.
Yeah. So
Maybe that's going overboard.
In
but
Japanese martial arts, they have a term called ki, which means kind of like energy force.
yeah,
The ki is the same as Chinese chi,
yeah.
like tai chi, means life energy. And there's another concept in Japanese martial arts called zanshin, which means remaining mind, which is like if you were to have water in a bowl and you do this,
Yeah.
there's still water in the bowl.
Oh,
Right?
crap.
There's still a few drops, right?
Yeah.
And what that means is like if I was to cut you with my sword and run past you, I can't just drop my guard suddenly. I can't give up at that moment,
No.
right? You might still be alive, or you might have a friend. You have to kind of keep up your
The
awareness.
friends behind the bushes.
Yeah. So when I saw these people pouring the pour over of the coffee at
Yeah.
a fairly typical traditional Japanese coffee house, not a third wave coffee house. After they've weighed it and they're doing the pouring, they're looking, pour, look.
Yeah.
They don't take their eyes off the coffee
no,
until it's done.
They're fixated on this.
know?
They want this to be the perfect cup for
So
you.
all the concentration, all the energy is going into making that cup of coffee. Could a robot make a better cup? Maybe, but it
I don't want the robot to make it.
removes the ritual from the tea ceremony,
This
from
is
the coffee
ritual.
ceremony.
Yes, thank you.
It's
the
less
ritual.
satisfying for the humans. For the humans, it's less satisfying
Yep.
if you remove the ritual. Right?
Think of, in going to the Japanese restaurants where they cook everything in front of you, and the guys, like knives flying around and all of that, and they're doing all sorts of. It's a spectacle, but there's something so. There's that ritual that he does each time to prepare that meal. There's something so, fundamentally human about that. You'd hate a robot arm to be doing that, because it wouldn't do that. It would do what it's programmed to do, and there's no personality or character or charm in it. I don't know. Being in digital for long enough, you start to be aware of all this. You start to be aware of, are we dehumanizing everything?
Man, that's a great topic. And then while you were talking about that, I thought about something else. So I hope I don't ruin that flow by going back.
No.
But one of the critiques I would give, a negative critique would give about Vietnam in the past, would be that there is this lack of attention to detail, a lack of ritual, a lack of concentration on a task for an extended period of time, and more of a concept of it's just good enough, let's get it out there.
Sure.
But recently, it does seem to be changing.
Yes.
For whatever reason. I went to a sushi restaurant this week here in Vietnam, and the Vietnamese sushi chefs were using Zan Xin, remaining mind. I don't know if they were trained to do it or what, but as they sliced the fish, I could tell their mind was 100%
Focus.
on that activity.
They're in the flow. Yeah.
They weren't using their cell phone and cutting the fish at the same time. That wasn't happening.
Oh, look, and this is seen in the coffee scene as well. I'm seeing these baristas where there's this intense focus on making a perfect cup, and I'm seeing much more evidence of that across the board. Think of in terms of digital design as well. Just the amount of craftsmanship that's going into some of the products here.
Yeah, the first time when I first came to Vietnam, the state of design was very poor.
Yes.
It involved a lot of neon green paired with glitter and neon pink.
What's wrong with that?
And it was just kind of garish in general.
Yeah. But how long ago was that? That was
like 8 to 10 years ago.
Yeah, but that's not just Vietnam. Newsflash, that was a sizable chunk of the world.
Was it? But it's been getting very sophisticated. Every year it gets more and more sophisticated. I don't know if this is because of economics, because the country's been booming for the last 20 years.
Fantastic.
I don't know if it's because of the information age and access to information.
That's certainly part of it.
But it's been improving significantly. There's a couple interviews I did with students who were
cool.
asking me what's the state of Vietnamese design.
Yeah.
6 or so years ago, I did these interviews, and even at that time I said that there'd been a lot of progress. But now,
But I talk to designers now, and they're just unbelievably passionate, and they're hungry, and these are the two key ingredients. When you look globally right now, like at what I do with UX stuff, there's this huge wave of junior designers coming on board because of all the accessibility of the learning. Like you can just pluck down some money, go into an intense sort of immersive course for 4 weeks, get all the basics covered, get a little bit of exposure to some real world company stuff, right? Graduate from that. And in a lot of cases, companies are just standing by the door to pluck you and when you've graduated and bring you on, right? But when you look at the fact that on a mass scale, how many people are accessing online courses, online university, these immersive things, it all adds up to a ton of people trying to join the workforce, and there's only so many UX spots, particularly in Southeast Asian countries. What separates them? If you have 20, 30, 40 juniors all applying for a job, and you're the guy that's recruiting and hiring for that position. What are you looking for? Ultimately, it comes back to this pure sense of passion for design. You know, the with this, they'll go through all, and they'll crash course, they'll do online, they'll do all these things to kind of get the basics covered. You know, as a recruiter, that there are gaps. There are tons of gaps there. But when they come in on these interviews, or when you look at their portfolio, there's this strong sense of passion. What that really is this, it's kind of like a promise. It's a promise to say that whatever gaps I have, I'll take care of them. It's that passion will drive me through, and it'll give me the strength and the determination and the grit to fill them. I love it. Love it. And you can tell if you interview 20 people and they're all coming in, drudging in, going, yeah, yes, I do job, you know, some Don Norman quotes and blah, blah, blah. But there's always those one or
Who's
two.
Don Norman?
Oh, quite a famous designer.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the grandfathers of, you know, design and Apple and all that kind of stuff. But I think there'll be those one or two candidates that come in, and there's just, you can tell when they're walking in the door, they're just so excited about doing design work, and they're just passionate about it. They want to soak up knowledge, and they just spend every day thinking about how things are designed and how they can do design. And this is wonderful. So it's kind of going back to these people that do something very precise because they love it. That's, you know, it's such an amazing thing.
I don't know if my awkward pause now is just because I'm drunk, because I'm quite weak for alcohol. I enjoy alcohol, but
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of practice drinking to excess, so my tolerance is quite low.
That's all right.
Or if I'm just quite enamored by the simple but profound situation we happen to find ourselves in at this moment.
I don't know. It's these kind of moments that make me love being in Vietnam, and I say that because it's this hub. It's this hub of people that have been here for 8 years, or many of them. There's people coming in and out. There's people that were born here that had left that are coming back, which I find fascinating, and I've talked to many recently looking for business opportunities because of the prosperity here. And you just have sort of this nice, stable group of people that call it home, people that are coming in and out that, just on vacation, and they say, hey, John's here, you should hook up with him. He kind of knows a few spots, and, he's always game to catch up. And then there's people that really want to set roots here and see the opportunity here. What a cool mix. Every week or every couple of weeks, I'm just meeting some different people that bring different perspective and a different story into my life. And where do you get that? Otherwise, I'm sure there's a few other places in the region or in the world that are similar to that, but Jesus Christ, it certainly keeps me here.
So here's this situation we find ourselves in. Our audience, no matter where we might be in the world, you have places like Canada, the United States, Australia, Great Britain, France,
Sure,
Scandinavia, where the economies are quite mature. The skill level, Japan, Korea,
sure.
okay, skill level quite developed. But the economies have had their booms, had their bubbles
That's true.
already,
Had.
right?
Or still
China even had its bubble already, and it's kind of in some post-bubble stage, I'm sure, at this point. Vietnam has been having a bubble for a long time now, probably still in the bubble. A lot of economic growth year upon year. A lot of skill growth year upon year. And in the past, let's say if we were to go back 10 years, maybe even 6 months, I don't know. There's a dynamic in the world where if you're from one of these other locations, if you are high skilled, highly educated, and you have a lot of savings relative to a developing nation. You can come into a developing nation where wages are essentially low, and unfortunately skill levels and education are comparatively low. And then you can leverage this power dynamic to your own advantage
Sure.
in some kind of neo-colonialism where you're leveraging your access to capital, your domain-specific knowledge,
Yeah. Yeah.
and your skills and your education
Sure.
in order to extract value for yourself in some way.
And for the place that you're providing that to.
Yeah, so you can come to a place like Vietnam, set up shop, make a company, and provide a service where you're able to. There's like, it's in some way similar to like a currency arbitrage, where I don't know, that kind of pulling that term out of my ass, but some similar to currency arbitrage, where you're like, I see a delta between a skill level and a price and a market, and I'm going to try to capitalize on that delta.
Okay.
But that delta is definitely shrinking.
Yeah.
And I think in a few years, I don't know if the oceans don't rise and swallow all of civilization,
I hope not.
then in maybe 10 years, we're in a different kind of world than we are right now, where
I'd like that.
because of the internet, there's not really this salary delta between one country to another. We're in a truly global community at that point where protectionism and free trade agreements and all these things stop having the teeth that they currently have or that they have had for the past few hundred years. I don't know.
Look, I don't think any of it really makes sense or is necessary in terms of having all of these currencies and different power outlets and driving on different sides of streets and all of this, but you can understand where it all came about. But at some point, you can imagine, you can imagine a world where all of this has kind of become more universal and more just, what does a passport look like 20 years from now? Like, what is that? It's an interesting thing to even think about. Does it exist even?
I keep opining for a world in which we can get a global citizenship, which allows us to live and work in any country.
Does that mean I don't have to go through my work permit process?
Exactly. You wouldn't have to go through your work permit process, which, by the way, is a lot easier than a Vietnamese trying to get an American work permit.
That's true.
Both
ways is not a fun experience.
Yeah.
Trying to lock down employment, which is your key way of saying, yes, I'm a suitable person to have in your country for a period of time. That's an interesting way of looking at it, is that you have to, securing work, your economic viability is the only determiner really to becoming part of living in a country, establishing yourself in a country for a set period of time, which can be then renewed based on the discretion of, and that's not here. I mean, that's everywhere. That's just how it works, right? And it's a strange concept, is you have to, if you can prove that you're a good worker and you know your stuff, we'll grant you the ability for a period of time to stay in this country. But I don't know. Surely it's more than that, because you're contributing into society in more ways than just making a company profit. But what is that? Like, how would you pin that to say one person should come in versus another?
The whole thing is ridiculous, and I think every year as the world evolves, it becomes more ridiculous.
Yes, it hasn't become less ridiculous. It's become more ridiculous.
Yeah, because as we have greater access to transportation and greater access to information, these arbitrary distinctions between nations become less and less meaningful.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Completely. So, all the stuff where you're trying to wire money to another country and you suck up $100 worth of fees just to, basically send a database line from one bank to another. when is that going to disappear? I know all the crypto guys are working on this right now, but just simple stuff like that. There are unreal barriers in front of that, and they're commercial interests or whatever preventing you from just taking money that you have and just giving it to someone else, not incurring all sorts of fees and days and I don't know,
Or
all
even
this
giving it to
stuff.
yourself.
Or even giving it to myself.
Moving it from one bank account to a different bank account.
Which, if you have bank accounts in multiple countries, that's not a lot of fun. When you run out of funds in one country and you need to shuffle money around, not a lot of fun. Even now, this is 2020. This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? You were supposed to be flying around in cars, and I'm trying to figure out how to not incur $100 worth of fees to juggle money between banks.
So I feel like we're in this situation where we have a parallel worlds or parallel systems. There's probably at least 3 tiers of this parallel system, probably many more. This is the hops talking, by the way. It's not me.
Well, and there are many hops in that beer, so,
Where you have a conventional old world style of thinking, which is like, I'm a citizen of a country and I work in that country, and my access to information and mobility is quite limited. In a sense, I'm like a serf serving a landlord, right?
Sure.
In some sense, right? If you are a tax-paying, hardworking citizen of any country in the world, you're essentially a serf serving a landlord.
Interesting analogy.
And then you've got people like you and I who have been like, hey, I'm going to try living and working in various other countries. If I was Vietnamese, I would be called an immigrant. But because I'm from Canada or America, I'm called an expat.
It is strange. Yeah. And I thought more and more about that terminology recently because it was brought up in a YouTube video or something that I watched. And at first I kind of go, okay, guys, let's not get too sensitive about terminology. But actually then I did start thinking, you're right. It's like there's this certain terminology and you're like, well, is that deserved or where did that come from? And maybe at some point in time it was applicable. But now I'm thinking, am I really an expatriate? Like,
You are.
Yes.
You are simultaneously an expatriate and an immigrant.
But yes, correct.
Regardless of what anyone else thinks.
But if I'm in Canada, nobody's called an expat. They're immigrants.
When I was in film school, one of my professors in their own body of work had made a documentary called Expat, which was about Americans who had expatriated to Canada.
Sure.
United Statesians who had expatriated
there's a bit of that
to
happening.
Canada.
Yeah.
And this was kind of, most of the people she had been interviewing is kind of Vietnam War era people, maybe onto 10 years, 20 years after that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in school 20 years ago, so, and I don't think,
well,
I don't think it was
likewise.
a new thing in her portfolio. It was probably like a 10-year-old film.
Yeah.
Even. So the whole thing does, this is kind of weird, but the whole thing does seem to be a power dynamic type thing.
But you know what's interesting is I lived in Jakarta for about a year and a half. And during that time, particularly for the first 7 months or so, I worked at a startup incubator. And, the premise of it was we would get all these really super smart people off the street that knew certain aspects of technology. And we'd all come together and devise these different business ideas that would solve challenges in Jakarta, right? And there's no shortage of problems to solve, right? I freaking love Jakarta. It's an awesome city. And, many people would say it's sort of this polarizing, oh, I don't like the traffic and pollution. But on the flip side of that, it's an amazing place to live. So in this environment where you're trying to solve problems through mobile technology, all these things, it might be how things are bought or transportation or you name it, you do realize very quickly why things are the way they are, right? Like why this has never changed in 50 years or why that thing hasn't progressed beyond what it has. And you realize these limiters in terms of trying to import things into the country or trying to do this or trying to do that. There are limiters there. There are barriers. There are roadblocks that there isn't sufficient technology to overcome yet. They're not insurmountable, but there are, at this present time, it's too much. It's too overwhelming to devise a business to overcome it. And so you realize that very quickly as a startup. I mean, if you have enough capital and all that, yes, you can make these things happen. But as a startup, you become acutely aware that things are the way they are, and then and at some point they'll change, but you can't pressure it too much to change because it'll push back at you viciously. And yeah, it was just a fascinating thing. You just sort of go in there in this hero mentality, like, oh, we've got all these things that we can solve with technology and mobile apps, and no, there's a few things you can do, but don't get cocky. The city will put you back in your place, and we did some great stuff, don't get me wrong, but you do realize that things are the way they are. It's cool. And Ho Chi Minh or any city, there's certain processes or things about the city that you want to change but just cannot. They must be that way for a period of time until something, it's like someone with a habit. There has to be that bottom before they can lift themselves, or I don't know. It's a cool thing. I'm so happy for that time to just be for a number of months thinking up and devising businesses to solve problems and realizing the realities of it, the realities of, well, you go, well, geez, why hasn't someone done this? And then you get in there and X number of weeks of research and you go, oh, okay. Yeah, I got you. All right. Sure.
Well, when I was very young, like high school age, university age, whenever I traveled to other countries, I would see business opportunities. And I think it's just because I'm coming from a very different perspective than the people who are living in that area. At the time, that was my thought. Like, oh, I'm coming at ideas from a really different perspective. So I see problems that they don't see. So I have solutions that they're not coming up with.
Sure.
Though the point you just made is interesting. It's like maybe they did try, and just there were certain conditions politically, economically, within that community, within that country that made, we tried that thing and there was too much resistance, and so we gave up.
Yeah, or just too much red tape, or too many barriers. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's not to put anyone off of doing these things or pushing the boundaries. It's nothing to do with that. It's just it was just quite telling that you start to appreciate why things are the way they are.
I wonder if I should change my white balance to tungsten instead of daylight. We are so orange.
Well, I went to Vung Tau and I had one trip where I was a noob, and I was on my bike without gloves, but I had my the sunscreen on, and about hour and a half, 2 hours in, I look at my hands, and they're bright red. And right? Like usually you get red later in the evening. They're red now. Like they're like, I'm witnessing redness.
So you were sunburned.
I was like beyond, yeah. And I actually damaged my skin from that. Like I actually totally roasted it, like rotisserie style on the handlebar.
My first design job, official design job, I was an intern at a new media company back when new media was a term that people used.
Yeah. Old school.
For that,
new media is now just media.
This is media. My professor had started, one of my professors at university started this company, and I joined his company as an intern.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And one of our first clients was a skin doctor who wanted to make some CD-ROM called Skin Sense, which was like this educational CD-ROM about skin cancer risks.
Yeah, okay.
Right? And it was this whole...
Was it a hot seller?
I think it was free. I don't even know. We were just hired to help him make this thing, but he just wanted to make some kind of engaging experience about how you should protect your skin, because he was very passionate about people having skin damage and skin cancer.
Yeah, and at the time, if you're trying to distribute CD-ROMs, that's not fun. Ask AOL.
No, no.
Now if you want to have a really nice skin cancer portal, you just get a domain and bang done. It's just, but back then that was brutal trying to get that out there to enough people that you can have impact, and it's hard to produce the the multimedia for that CD so someone doesn't put it in and run it and go, oh my god, this is lame, and take it out. It's a significant amount of effort.
Yeah. No, it was like, I don't even know. I was an employee, not the boss, so I don't know what they got paid.
Well, then
to make the thing,
it's a lot of work that goes into making something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Where we're using like Flash or like
either Micromedia Director or Flash. I don't remember what that
which
project
just means
used.
It's a ton of work
Yeah.
to go into that CD-ROM, and then you're trying to basically flog physical CDs, which is just like that's a tough gig.
Yeah, or give away. I mean, I don't know if it was
It's hard enough to get people to go to a domain name now, let alone sending off CDs to people.
When we met, you mentioned that one of the favorite things that you like about your time in Vietnam is the motorbike trips you've taken.
Just the motorbike in general. I absolutely love it. When I was in other countries, I loved my car, and really enjoyed it. But here it is just a totally different game. Is absolutely one of the greatest joys of being here. And I think a lot of people, when they come into the country and they sort of come out of the airport and I remember a friend of mine came to visit me from Melbourne, and he came and landed, and I'm trying to have a cohesive conversation with him in the taxi on the way back to my apartment, and he's just looking out at the street trying to figure out the traffic. He can't hold a conversation because of it. Another passion project I wanted to do is I'm fascinated by the soundscape in Vietnam. So you have the Bap Sao Day guy and the all of these sounds.
Up Sao Day.
Yeah, and as a tourist, if you're staying in the hotel and you hear all these sounds going on in the middle of the night, and I've heard a lot of people go, how do you sleep with this, and how do you deal with this, and there's so much noise, and I blah blah blah. But what you actually realize that over the years of living here, you realize if you didn't hear them, it would be a problem. It's that whole intro of like Vanilla Sky, where Tom Cruise comes out into Times Square and there's nobody there, and it's strange and confusing. There's something very settling about having all of these street vendors and the soundscape that you hear in Vietnam. It's very unique, and it's very, I don't know, it's very dynamic. I literally want to just take a high quality microphone and record all this for prosperity's sake. I'm not shitting you. The reason I say that is, if you look at how e-commerce will eventually play out, all these little merchants and wet markets and all that will slowly, disappear, I guess, unfortunately. That soundscape is gone. And to record that for prosperity's sake, to say, hey, like 10, 20, 30 years ago, whatever, this is what it sounded like when you were traveling down the street in Ho Chi Minh City, and all of these vendors were shouting stuff on PA speakers, and I think that would be an amazing project, just to capture that in some way that you can feel that you're there if you put some headphones on. I don't know. I think it's all going to be gone, and sadly. And unfortunately, all these, e-commerce monsters are going to gobble it all up. And, all these little street vendors that I pass by every day will be gone.
So a moment ago, I was, in many ways, expounding upon the virtues of positive globalization.
Yes.
We're going to have no more passports. We can live and work any country in the world. Your salary is going to be dependent on your skills and not on your citizenship. And it's going to be a fantastic utopia.
That was pretty cool.
The counterpoint is that it's hard to imagine in Vietnam, but in the extreme scenario, the counterpoint is there's no more variety in coffee. Everything is Starbucks,
Kill me.
right? I mean, that's the counter.
Yeah.
That's the
Oh, look,
potential
just
dark
kill
side
me.
of that
Just
coin.
Kill me. Yeah. Because, like, why? Why?
Right?
The variety that we see in front of us now, that is life. If you take all that away, what is it? What's
in the
left?
majority of the United States, Main Street America, which had a variety of hardware stores, has been replaced by Home Depot, and the variety of delis and grocery shops has been replaced by whatever
Walmart.
you know,
Walmart. Essentially.
Walmart or
It's
Safeway.
good. It's
or
the good enough at the right value. It hits that target spot that everybody says, you know what, I'm not going to go to the deli anymore. I'm just going to get the okay product here because it's $2 cheaper. That's what it comes down to.
and the wet marts in Saigon will be replaced by Big C or whatever comes after that. And
Oh.
will the coffees be replaced by Starbucks, or will they all be replaced by what's that one called, like good or whatever?
What's that?
Maybe I'm saying it wrong, but there's, of course, there's always new chains that pop up and try to dominate the market.
Oh, sure. And there's always going to be a place for chains. I'm okay with chains. There's nothing wrong with them. And if you're working and you're in an office tower and one of those chains is at the bottom of your tower, you're likely going to be a patron there. And then you get your caffeine fix. But for all the other times, you want that diversity of just experiences and something different. What is that barista coffee bean roasting process going to create for me at this time? Like if you always rely on McDonald's for your burgers, that's why you have the gourmet burger scene, and you have all of these other facets of burgers to really enjoy what a burger actually is. And it's the diversity. I mean, as humans, we crave some level of diversity. We want some stable aspect of it. There's a sort of I don't know, what do you call it? There's some part of our lives that has to have stability, but there's also this part that yearns for this dynamic part of it that wants a different experience each time it has it. You can't just eat broccoli every day. Your body will tell you, no.
Did you know that they've done studies about diet, and when you're presented with a variety of food, you eat more food. So if you gave a subject or a community, a tribe, one type of food, they will limit how much they eat. They won't overeat.
Yeah.
But if you then present a second food that's like not the same as the first food, even though they were full, they'll get a second stomach and they'll eat that new thing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
This is like, for in terms of design, this is why I focus a lot right now on behavioral economics. If I'm doing e-commerce websites or anything that's selling things, understanding how we think and what motivates us and what compels us to make one decision over another or pick something versus another, that's really a fundamental that a designer should understand when they're making these kinds of products, like an e-commerce site or whatever. Understand why do people buy what they buy? Why do they eat what they eat, or when they eat, or how much they eat? This is such a fascinating topic. I've been absolutely loving just digging into this subject matter now more than ever, and going through books and whatever I can get my hands on. It's such a fascinating topic about how irrational we are.
Okay. As a designer, how do you balance this is the right design decision to provide the most value for my customer who's paying me counterpointed against, but that customer's product is eventually going to ruin the world?
Ruin the world.
Well, I mean, kind of trying to paint the most extreme picture here.
Yeah, at the very, prior to that, if I'm going into design engagements, I want them to align to what I believe in. And that may be a luxury I have at this stage of my career, but you're trying to actually mitigate having those kinds of questions come up in your career. At the beginning, you're kind of taking what you can to get experience and build up a portfolio, but where I'm at now, you pick and choose very carefully, and it's amazing what you say no to.
because
That's and it's
because
that exact question where I'm like, I don't need to be involved in that. It's not.
for instance, as a
Give me a hypothetical
yeah,
example.
this is
Yeah.
an exercise, a hypothetical exercise, a thought experiment. That's what those are called. Let's say Amazon's not where they are today. We go back in time a little bit.
Okay.
And somebody says, hey, there's this new company called Amazon, but their design kind of sucks. Why don't you help them have a better shopping cart experience?
Sure.
And you're like, yeah, that sounds, are they going to pay me? And you're like, yeah, they're going to pay you. Okay, that sounds like a challenge.
Yeah.
And you design the perfect shopping experience and you come up with one-click shopping,
Such a cool.
you know?
Yeah.
And now, and as a designer, you were like, I'm just trying to make this within this bubble. I'm trying to make this product as good as it can be. I'm trying to be the best designer I can be.
Sure.
But an unforeseen consequence was all the bookstores in the world went out of business.
Yeah.
You know? And you're
Yeah.
like, shit, I wasn't trying to cause all the independent bookstores to go out of business.
Yeah,
I was
and-
just trying to make this
but-
one thing good.
Yes, but and there will still be a niche market for those bookstores, I hope. But that's also the same reason why there's no video rental stores and there's no many other things, because it's better.
I guess so.
Because if I can click something in one click and it shows up at my door, so this is a progression thing, a society progression thing.
As I understand
inevitable.
it, the members of the Manhattan Project, they were like just so fixated on the novelty of the problem they were trying to solve, the engineering problem.
Yes.
And it wasn't until like kind of they were past the point of no return that
Yeah.
they started to think about the potential
Could be a bit of an issue. Yeah.
use cases.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Anyways, I mean, design, it's hard to know if you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing.
Even if you said to me, this is where it's going to go, I still would have wanted to participate, because it's touched that many lives in a positive way, because it was a frictionless shopping experience, and that was what you were brought on board to design for. And you've done that properly. That's not to say Amazon's UX is perfect, by no means, but they hit certain things perfectly in such a way that they just had this mass adoption. But these guys that basically fell to the off to the side and weren't able to survive and compete with that, I have mixed feelings. In some industries, I think they deserved it, and they had to go. This was a natural attrition of that marketplace. I'm okay with it. And maybe it's my own affinity to that particular market that didn't want them to go. And, what's it for me to pick and choose who gets to survive these, technological transformations or not? The big one that I see coming up is, autonomous cars. If we look at the next, I don't know, 20 years or so, 10, 20, 30 years, whatever.
Maybe five.
Some point in our lives, right? If autonomous takes hold completely and all the roads are reconfigured to be autonomous only, because you can't have these wacky human drivers mixed in with the robots, what does that look like as a citizen in a city that needs to get around? What is that experience and user journey, and how does that improve my life or hold my life back? The more you start thinking about it, when you become as a citizen completely incapable of taking yourself in distance, you use a bicycle or whatever, but when you realize that to get to the other side of the town, you're depending on likely a few companies that are monopolized that whole network of vehicles to get you around. If they or governments or whatever impose limits on how you can move around, what has that done for us? Does it become scary? Or do they say, hey, we've decided to put a curfew so that, after 2 a.m. you can only come home, you can't go out? or certain times of the day you can only do this or that, or certain areas of the city cost more than others, so it becomes not a net neutrality issue but a place neutrality issue.
This is an extremely fascinating topic because I have such strong opinions arguing for both points.
Yeah, and it's coming. There's a lot of things that are coming technologically that are going to blow our minds. I think we're in a hot spot right now in the next 20 years where all of these technologies are going to converge that are immature right now. So it's the AI, it's 5G, it's the augmented reality, and there's a few others that are suddenly going to mature to the point where they become really viable at a consumer level. Things like AR are starting to already be adopted in industrial and commercial aspects, but they'll eventually trickle their way down in a format that a typical consumer will go, I want to purchase that, I want that to be part of my life, and it's a pair of Ray-Bans I put on that augments my day-to-day life. That's going to come. All of these advances in screen technology, battery technology, communications with 5G, all of these things will all come together, and suddenly we're not carrying these phones around anymore, which are ridiculous, to be honest. It'll be quite a different form factor of our technological existence.
There's two issues. Let's take autonomous driving and let's take airport security.
Oh, I love it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So these are two issues that are kind of parallel because
Sure.
in many cases, in the case of airport security, the question that you have to make a decision is between freedom and safety. And for a long time, most of the world's governments, especially the United States, but pretty much everyone else followed suit. They were like, we want to prioritize safety over freedom. So
Correct.
Please take off your shoes and please don't have a water with you.
Yeah.
Right?
And let me do a complete body scan of you with this computer.
Yeah. So now you have a lot of safety, but you have no freedom. Don't have the freedom to just keep your shoes on and not get athlete's foot. And you don't have the, you don't have the freedom to.
I think it's called airport foot.
Yeah. Good. So now you can get athlete's foot and be thirsty.
Airport foot.
You can get airport foot or be thirsty, but at least you're not going to have a bombing on the airplane.
But if you look at the layers of screening, you do realize, and I think George Carlin or someone put this fairly better than I ever could, is that it's a succession of fairly poor levels of filtering that you have to go through to get onto a plane. Like if the metal scanner didn't work, well, let's put you through this, or I don't know.
I would almost. I don't know if I'm in the majority or the minority here, but for myself, I would rather have freedom than safety in that case.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Now let's look at...
That's easy for us to say given where we live or have lived. For people in countries that safety is not quite up to snuff, maybe they would reprioritize that. But we're talking really about the civilization we want to live in where we are.
If your flight has the potential to get to a high value target, like the Pentagon or the World Trade Center, maybe your flight should have more security, more scrutiny. Maybe. But if you're going from Boise, Idaho to somewhere else in Idaho, just relax.
Everyone's
a little
favorite
bit.
trip. Yeah.
Just relax a little bit.
That's true. Yes.
But this is not that different from autonomous driving because autonomous driving will make driving more safe eventually. For sure.
Freedom comes at so many different levels, though. You're talking about bodily freedom of not freedom. Sorry, I'm going to have to rephrase this one. Oh, dear. So freedom comes at different levels and safety comes at different levels. If I look at my life in Western countries in terms of freedom, how that's expressed here is in Vietnam is considerably different. And I'd use the motorbike analogy to say that it gives me freedom, the sense of freedom beyond what I felt that I had anywhere else. If I look at going to meet with you, for example, if I was to do that in Canada, Australia, or America, or wherever, you know, driving a car, likely greater distances, finding somewhere to park, walking from there, and getting to the venue, and that, it's a substantially different experience than just hopping on my bike and literally just dumping it at the front door and just being here for a minuscule amount of money. Is that freedom as well? There's this different layers of freedom that are quite fascinating to explore.
As freedom increases, safety decreases. That's my theorem.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, as freedom increases, risk increases. I guess.
Or are there caveats to that?
I don't think there are. The most free person is on the edge of stopping to exist at any moment.
So, having been here for many years, and for me being in the region, because, you know, everywhere in Southeast Asia, I think, teaches you this, I was very particular about following the letter of everything in the Western countries that I lived in. And here, realizing that you can you just go with the flow.
Going with the flow is the safest action you can take here. It's not necessarily, it's not necessarily the most free action, though. Going against the flow would be more freedom.
But
it is safer to go with the flow.
You're kind of letting go of certain details and certain things that feels very good here. You're not so caught up in the detail of things here. You just realize that it'll happen.
Yeah.
And it'll be okay. The world's not going to end because you didn't do this or that. It's okay. Whereas in other countries, there's this very strong emphasis on this. You got to do this. I don't know. There's something quite liberating about it. I don't know if it's sort of the palm tree syndrome with it when you get into a tropical country, that suddenly you look at the perspective that you take on things is a bit different.
Here's a country I know nothing about. Germany.
Okay.
But they are known for, at an arm's distance, following process.
You tend to think so.
To a stifling amount. The trains run on time.
Yeah.
Yet the speed limit on the Autobahn is very high.
I like that speed
limit. So
I think that should be adopted. Speaking of universal adoption and, like, you know, making things across the world, I think Autobahns should be introduced everywhere.
So I wanted to come back to autonomous cars, at least in the United States, because who knows what's going to happen with those in Vietnam. I don't think they would work for the next 10 years. But in the United States, they could work, I guess.
Yeah.
And 30 to 60,000 people a year die in automobile accidents, which is like higher than coronavirus and probably higher than cancer and higher than terrorism and
it's a lot.
Probably
it's
higher
a fair
than
chunk
war.
Of people.
It's a lot.
And not only that doesn't speak to all the people that have been, you know, significantly impacted through just an unbelievable amount of, like,
so even if you don't die, you might be paralyzed or
the stat would be a lot more then.
Yeah. But driving is one of the most awesome sensations you can have.
And I can't believe for the majority of my life, I just saw motorcycles as this thing that, like, how could you even contemplate getting on this, and, you know, you're going to kill yourself. Now I love it. And
you're driving a scooter, not a motorcycle.
That's okay. At the end of the day, you're on the road on two wheels.
But if you're on the road with 125 or 150 cc's, it's not the same as being on the road on two wheels with 1,000 cc's, right?
In roads that are not really designed for it, with other drivers, car drivers or truck drivers, really not anticipating you being there and really not considering you. Here, there's something about how everybody knows you're there. They're considering it, I guess.
There's enough, because the traffic is as slow as it is, there's enough time to consider it. And if you end up on the freeway where most of the deaths happen, as far as I know, the situation is you've got, like, you're traveling at highway speeds alongside with semi-trucks that don't give a fuck about you.
That is correct. So actually, this all came from the original conversation, question that you asked me, which was about these long distance trips that I was taking in Vietnam that made me love being here. Some parts of those trips are gnarly. They're really pretty hardcore. You have all these trucks coming around you, and it really does. There is a heightened sense of like, wow, if I goof this up, I'm in a life-changing accident, right? But for the vast majority of those trips, the longest trip that I took was to Dalat from Ho Chi Minh, which is about 900 kilometers round trip. Went through the interior of the country to get there, and then took along the coast on the way back. That's a life-changing experience. Like anybody coming to Vietnam, if they have the capacity to be able to do that, they really should consider it. I really, out of everything, all the places in the world that I've gone to, having that trip had a profound impact on me. And there were certain parts there that I was going, safety factors, kind of, the levels kind of. But there was other parts where it's like, this is well worth it. This is what it is. Is the risk versus reward that you get in anything in life.
Isn't this like metaphoric for life in general?
Yes.
You know?
Yes, it is, on a motorbike.
Because I climbed Kilimanjaro with my father.
What an amazing experience.
It was an amazing experience, and barely made it myself. Actually, the older people did better for some reason.
Yeah, but they've probably been,
And then, like, since then, he's done Everest Base Camp twice and something in South America. And, he's really gotten in on this. And
hats off to him.
I don't know. This is so stupid, but I recently watched the TV series Vikings.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of it's just fantasy, or it's just dramatization of loosely cobbled together historic facts, but at the same time, it's so compelling.
Yeah.
You're like,
oh, it is. Yeah.
There's something about doing something where it's not great odds. It's not particularly safe. But if you survive,
you'll feel pretty good about it.
Today on YouTube, a short video I saw about some crew that broke the transatlantic sailing speed record. And they did it.
They're insane.
They did it in 5.5 days. The record before that was 6.5 days. 100 years ago, the record was set at 12 days.
That's unbelievable.
And the guys they have a few sound clips with the participants, and they're like, it kind of sucks a lot. But there's nowhere else I'd rather
basically
be.
After day 2.
Yeah. I wish I had new boots, one guy said,
sure.
because I guess probably his shoes are completely soaked through at this after like the first half a day, right?
Yeah.
But there's nowhere else I'd rather be.
It's not like they didn't know all that was going to happen going into it. They wanted that experience.
A couple times on Joe Rogan, there's been this guy that dragged himself across the Antarctic with a sled of supplies, instead of using motorized support or wind support or canine support. It's just himself and a sled of supplies, and it wasn't easy.
Oh God, no. Could you imagine?
Right? But there's no way that guy would say it wasn't worth it, or if I could have gone back, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, if he got out of it alive, he'd look back and go, "Holy crap, I did."
So what does that mean about existence? That like
because we're challenging ourselves and we're saying, look, that risk is worth it, and it feels so good when you've challenged the risk and you got out alive, right? And that's why these small trips, and everybody's saying, "Oh, you sure you're going to go on the highways?" Yes, because actually, when you're sensible about it and you're not complacent, and you're well prepared, and you have a freaking driver's license and all of these things, and you do it, it feels very good. The sense of freedom, just being on the road like that, it feels fantastic. It's incomparable. I've done many of these trips now, and I want to do a lot more.
I'm only going to share this story because it popped in my mind as you were saying that. About 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, there was a foreigner who was lost in the north. And people were searching for him for days.
All right.
He ended up being found dead.
Oh.
He had been free soloing, so climbing without any partner or ropes or anything.
Wow.
But he had sent a text message to his girlfriend a couple days before he died, where he had said, "This is the most alive I've ever felt."
Yeah. Holy shit, eh? Wow.
And
And you know what? How telling that would be.
yeah, I mean, you could look at him and saying, "Oh, climbing mountains without a rope, without a friend there to call for emergency if you got hurt.
Yeah, you're just out there.
You're a
You
moron," right?
Yeah.
That's, I think,
No.
most people's initial reaction.
No,
But
no.
it's the most alive he ever felt. So
Think
how
of
do
that.
we-
You're sort of contract yourself, but when you're depressed and you're sad and you become insular and you get smaller and smaller and your world becomes more compact, I think. And it's the opposite of that. He was living, was he living his truth? I don't know. Like, it's so easy for us to sit here and I don't know, watch guys doing this on YouTube and Netflix and stuff, but to go and do that, like to the degree that this guy went and did it. I mean, I guess he slipped up and he didn't make it, and that's unfortunate. But shit, man, he totally got out there and he goes, I'm imagining this. I want it to happen and manifest, and I'm gonna do this. That's cool. It's just a tragic outcome, but it doesn't mean that because you do that there's always going to be that tragic outcome. I mean, it might have slipped up.
So to bring this back to Vikings and current society, I'm going to put another crazy theory out there that
Please.
modern society does not have a healthy relationship with death. And one of the things that came across within, I don't know if it's true or not, because it's just a movie, but we watch movies and we absorb whatever truths we do from them, whether they were true or not, right? So many characters in the Vikings TV series justify their actions by, if I die, I'm going to be in Valhalla with Odin and living it up every day because I died of honorable death. Because I was out there risking myself, not like a coward who's gonna not when they die go to Valhalla. Now, of course, that's all fantasy and not true, but if we take it as metaphor, a life carefully lived, working in accounting and never taking risks and dying in old age, but never having challenged yourself,
I don't know.
versus a life where you died free solo climbing at the age of 28.
I think if I looked at my life, if I was brutally honest, for a large portion of my life, I should have been here, or somewhere similar to here, but I didn't just pull the fucking trigger. And there's so many excuses about, well, how do I find work, and how do I do this, and how do I that? Nah, this is all shit, right? Really, I should have been here much earlier. That's an interesting realization to have in your life, and there's nothing you can do about it. You came when you came, and maybe when you came to somewhere like here, that was the only time you could come here because you had web companies that needed your help, and you came here. And the whole reason I found out about being here was these digital nomads were out in the world, and a lot of them were set up here in Ho Chi Minh, and they're all saying, hey, this is a great place. I really knew nothing about Vietnam at that time. And it wasn't until they all said, hey, we're all set up shop and we got our MacBooks out and we're doing our thing. And I'm like, oh, I'd like to do that too. And finally I just, it's a shit or get off the pot kind of situation. And I did it. And that's the reward, is now you're living the life that you're supposed to be living. It feels so good to know that you took those cues out of life and you go, you know what? I'm going to act on them. I'm going to buy that plane ticket. I'm going to go there and suss it out and do whatever it takes to get there. I mean, the time between when I landed in Saigon and saw it for a week and actually got here to work in a job that I was employed was considerable. There was a lot of time there. And, the agency I was with in Melbourne, after that 1 week trip, I said, the managing director was a cool guy. It takes a certain managing director to say yes to this. But I said, look, a lot of my clients right now are remote. Can I just take my MacBook and just gently get on a plane and hang out in Saigon for a month and work there? And he's like, yes. And that's pretty cool. And it was meant to happen. And that month there solidified in my mind that I was in the right trajectory in my life to be where I needed to be. And that's a cool realization. And not a lot of people, I think, have the fortune to have that happen to them. They stay in one place and they feel that it's too much to get out from there, but it feels so good when you do that. Oh, I don't know. It's just, wow.
Wow. I didn't expect us to get in this topic. I thought we would probably talk about UI in some kind of trite way, but I'm happy that we're here instead.
Another conversation.
And man, let's try to leave our audience with one final takeaway. Like if we could summarize this episode. Go ahead, try to summarize it. I'm going to put you on the spot for that while I drink my beer.
Oh man. It comes back to, I don't know, if it's design exchange, it's not losing sight of our craft as designers, right? And it's going back to, the coffee and the perfection that went into making that perfect cup of coffee. But in that passion also comes like the willingness to go out and explore and take risks and do these things. Ultimately, that all comes together back to being a good designer, right? If that's the theme of your show, wow, does that not come back together so nicely? Is just having passion and precision about what you do, but willing to take risks and willing to explore and willing to go out there and put yourself on the line for a design that you believe in or a path that you want to take. I don't know. That's the best way I can wrap shit up. Yeah.
So in summary, no matter how hard you try at design, what you make's probably not going to be better than a well-crafted beer or coffee. So
True that. Cheers.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hit like and subscribe. If people would like to find out more about what you're doing, share with us again your coffee website. And if you have anything else that you want to plug, go ahead and just do it now.
Well, just go to johnderagon.com and I'll have it all there.
See you next time, I guess.
Bye.
Cheers, John.
Hey, cheers. That was good.